welcome to this edition of Energy Connects Discussions with me, Julian Walker, as I speak to leading energy executives and experts around the world for Energy Connects, our global platform for the entire energy industry. Today, I'm delighted to welcome the CEO of Energy Systems at DNV, Ditlev Engel. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
We've got a lot to talk about, and obviously going to be focusing on DNV's 2023 edition of your Energy Industry Insights report. We'll start off. What did the report show about what the priorities are around the energy trilemma from the people you surveyed?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's important to say we have made this report a number of years, and last year when we launched it, unfortunately, it was exactly on the day of the invasion of Ukraine. And I mentioned this because when we are launching the report this year, we obviously look at a lot of deltas. And therefore, it's important to say that the data last year was before we knew there was a war coming. And now the survey has been done in January and December 2022. So we have a much sort of the whole war aspect now built into the data. And I think that's important to understand when you look at the deltas and the data. So I think we've surveyed 1,300 people in the industry. And I think what comes across very clearly, and maybe not surprising, that energy security is now the top priority. It wasn't before, but now it is. And therefore, we also are very much looking into this whole, where are we on the energy trilemma? And are there any changes happening there? And the real change we're seeing is that now energy security is number one.
Very interesting, and obviously you can see why, and I think you've seen that in the industry and conferences I've gone to as well. So and just for the audience as well, what were the next two then in a row? So you had started with energy security and then trilemma.
Yeah, so then it's of course then affordability and sustainability, which are the three, in the trilemma. So they have always been top of mind. And therefore now, of course, the very interesting thing is, will the energy situation we have today in any way change the priority of the industry in the longer term? And that, of course, also what we've been looking a lot into. Before the invasion, it was clear that sustainability was higher than it is now. So that has been a change from the past.
Absolutely. And I wanted to get your viewpoint of, in the report, are you seeing any progress in the energy transition or people's interest in the topic?
I think it's important also to remember that the IEA released the carbon emission numbers for 2022, and they were, of course, at the highest, not of course, unfortunately, on the highest level ever. So we are not seeing that we are decarbonizing as a world. On the contrary, we keep increasing. And we know, according to the Paris Agreement, if we're going to reach that, we will have to reduce our emission 8% every single year going forward. And the only year we really managed to push it down was during COVID, which was 6%. And we can, of course, only stop flying once. So it's clear that the challenge also in the energy industry to decarbonize much, much faster, which nearly all countries in the world have signed up to, is just not happening. And therefore, I think it's unfortunately that even though there is a lot of renewables additions rather than exchange, so we are actually seeing that. So yes, there's a lot of renewables and carbon-free coming into the mix, but it doesn't replace the existing emissions.
Interesting, Ditlev, and I think a lot of this can be around investment. So there's obviously a feel of a lack of investment in the oil and gas sector itself, but also do you think there's been enough investment in renewables? And do you see that growing then with all these targets being set?
Yeah, so we basically in the report we talk about 4 different types of perspective. We have the electrical power perspective, the renewables perspective, the oil and gas perspective, and then the energy consumers perspective. And I think what is interesting about the investment is that from the oil and gas industry point of view, They expect more investments, but with a shorter term focus. That means it's going to be something for the next 5 years, which I think also on the other hand resonates a bit with the energy security. We obviously have seen in Europe in particular here that in order to increase energy security, a lot of investments have been made short term into LNG plants. There's no support for existing coal plants and so on. But I would say from a carbon perspective point of view, the good news is that it is more short-term investments rather than people are seeing it's going to be very long-term investments.
That's really interesting to hear. And I wanted to get a bit more on, specifically investment in the renewable industry. What does the report say in maybe specific renewable areas that you see investment or interest in, or is there specific renewable energies that people really want to focus on, or the companies will be looking at?
I would say as an industry, the industry is less optimistic than it used to be, unfortunately. But on the other hand, as I said, we also have to say that a lot of the respondents are also saying that they have low confidence in our ability to reach the climate targets. And I'm sure that's, of course, also influenced the overall sentiment on these aspects. So there's still a lot of focus on this. We're actually also seeing that from the industrial consumer side, quite a number are considering to produce their own energy going forward, which again is maybe also building into the energy security aspect, that some of the bigger consumers are actually contemplating investing into their own to secure the power for their production, etc. So I think again these are some of the important trends. But no doubt that the optimism for scaling of renewables have definitely here in the year 2022 gone down, which is quite a paradox because from our perspective, actually, when you talk about security, sustainability, and affordability, actually what all plays into the hands of the renewables. Also, when we know now how much the prices have come down on both wind and solar, and also apart from this report, we also at DNV produced the Energy Transition Outlook, and that is forecasting the expected cost of production going forward. So we are, for instance, seeing that when it comes to battery storage, that the prices are going to fall dramatically. And we obviously know that we are an industry which long-term thinking is very, very important. So from our perspective, as we will need to not only decarbonize, but also much more electrify, the only sensible financial thing to do is to maintain the focus on decarbonizing and electrifying in the renewable way, also from a cost perspective.
Really interesting to hear that. And I'm glad you mentioned electrification, because obviously I wanted to get your viewpoint and see what the report's findings had around, maybe hurdles in the power sector, but especially looking at, grid optimization and grid investment, because I think that has certainly been a really big factor in 2022.
They are, again, the grid is a massive topic, and here the electrical power industry obviously is very concerned because we are not just deploying the renewables fast enough, but also the whole investment on grid build out is a very big barrier for the industry. But what is also very interesting and maybe not so much technology driven is that the industry is also pointing to that the capacity of people to do all the things we want to do is another barrier that the industry needs to relate to. So the pressure on having all the right people and skills available to do all the things we do is something that people also reflecting on, they see as a barrier. And then again, I would say, as I said, the grid is the really big thing.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned there about pessimism about hitting decarbonisation targets. What do you see, how can this progress in the right way or the right speed? Obviously this year we've got COP again, this time in the UAE, towards the end of the year. But I'd just like to get, what do you think about that? And can you, as we lead up to that, can, the industry's not step in, but talk about it and sort of action on things?
I think that the interesting thing here is that from a DNV perspective, our view is this is an implementation challenge, not a technology challenge. And that means that it's really about implementation. And we have also actually, in connection with COP26, we published a report which we call the Pathway to Net Zero. And the reason for that is that when you talk about such broad aspect, you can't just talk about it from a global scale. You have to talk about it from a regional perspective. So we have divided the world into 10 different regions because the starting points are very different. And what you can actually see from that, if we are going to get to the Paris Agreement, which I'm sure is going to be a big topic on the national determined contributions at the COP, then it's about building the right portfolio. So if we're going to get to Paris, our view is that some parts of the world, it's not enough to get to zero. So in Europe, North America, other places, we need to go to minus. And then at the same time, you're hearing today, well, you know, carbon capture and storage is too expensive because compared to solar, but that's not the right discussion to have. The right discussion to have is how to build the right portfolio of how much solar, how much wind, how much CCS, etc., to get to the climate targets. And I think this is why also our view is that all the technologies that we know have a role to play, whether it's the hard to abate sectors or whether it's this on the CCS side, etc., and then build the most optimal portfolio that will get you to there. So I think that's really also what's going to be the main topic. And finally, I would say in order to release all the investments, it's extremely important that the regulatory frameworks doesn't talk about we want to achieve something in 2040. What industry needs is that we will do this in 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, because that level of security is what will release the investments to make sure that the capacity needed is going to be built out for all the things we want to achieve. So I would say one, at least from our point of view, biggest piece of advice is make sure that your targets are, I wouldn't say monthly, but at least yearly of what you have to achieve, because otherwise industry is holding back and then we end up in a chicken and egg situation. But it is not, and I think this is very important to say, it's not a technology challenge, it's an implementation challenge, and the regulatory framework should reflect that.
That's really interesting, and I think certainly got a feeling of what's going on in the US and the IRA bill of trying to get climate investment. You know, you're really hearing industry saying this is the way forward that they see, especially investing in the United States, and then you know hoping other regions step up to it is what we're hearing.
Yeah, and I guess it's now called the Inflation Reduction Act, but maybe it should have been called the Implementation Act, because I think that's exactly what it is. It is a way to really scale and implement fast, and that is what that bill is doing. And so I think this is what we all need to learn from, that it is really about, and that's exactly the reason why we made the Pathway to Net Zero report, was to, instead of saying you need to do more, you know, that's maybe not so constructive. So we said, okay, would be our best suggestions to do it in the most economical way in order to deliver on the decarbonization targets.
Super, Ditlev. Well, I really appreciate giving me time to speak more about your 2023 edition of the Energy Industry Insights Report. And I think a lot more to discuss, and hopefully see you here in the UAE towards the end of the year, maybe around ADIPEC time as well.
Thank you so much. And just to mention that all the reports can be downloaded for free at DNV's website if any of the listeners would like to do that.
Great. Yeah, that's really good to know. Thanks everyone for watching, and I look forward to bringing you more engaging discussions soon.